Hello and welcome. Welcome to the Permission Mission Show. My name is Mary McElhat and I am your host today. We are broadcasting live here in Las Vegas, Nevada, every Friday at 11 a.m. The Permission Mission Show is talking about tough stuff, great stuff, all the things that people typically avoid because it's not always fun. I am here to normalize the conversation of mortality. I have a very special guest here today that took some work to get here because today's topic is about relationships. I first want to acknowledge all those marriages that have been together and weathered storms together and put up with one another. Dan and I just celebrated our 20th wedding anniversary. And some days we like each other, and some days to each other. Some days we like each other, and there are some days we don't. And today's topic is definitely one that had us arguing all the way in the car until we got here, and that's the honest truth.
That's true.
So, your mother and father have been married for 55 years.
Yep.
My father and his sweet bride, Mama Fran, was married for over 40 something years. Anyone else out there who has put in the work, congratulations. And today, Dan and I want to break through some barriers that we still have around the conversation of mortality. So Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
So my first question, actually tell the audience a little bit about you.
Sure, no problem. So currently right now I'm the program director over at the College of Southern Nevada. I've been a practicing graphic designer for 33 years. We've been happily married for 20 and been seeing each other for 21. So we're officially the blackjack couple. To make things even more confusing, as she was mentioning before, my parents have been married for 55 years and their name is Dan and Mary too.
Yes.
Which is hilarious. So that's really cool. So they really set a great example for me being raised. I was born in Salt Lake City, raised here in Las Vegas in 77. Went to school here, got an opportunity to go to a private school, went to college. And, there was a lot of different subjects that we just didn't talk about. And one of them is exactly what we're talking about today, which is, my mom and she would bring me to cemeteries to collect pine cones because she would make these pine cone wreaths.
Yeah.
And I always loved cemeteries. I love seeing the cemeteries and I loved it, but I just didn't know what it was. I had no clue that these were people there. I just thought it was just a place to go to get pine cones and stuff. And then years later, even where we would travel and go to places, I would always be compelled to go visit cemeteries. And when I was in Paris, I loved seeing all the cemeteries there of some famous people. When we were on our honeymoon, we went and walked through a cemetery. It's just because I absolutely love it. And it was very fascinating just to see these, names and dates, but not knowing anything about the stories behind these people or knowing that's the final resting place for people. And so I'm very much aware of it, but the subject of talking about it, we would always be very quiet, very silent about it. So it's been interesting in our relationship because that's what you do all the time. And let me tell you, hopefully husbands will understand this, is sometimes there's these subjects where you're called out on certain things to talk about and you really do not want to talk about it. And so this is a subject I normally don't like to talk about. It's just because it's just weird for me. It's uncomfortable. But I'm just glad I'm here to show people that it's okay to be uncomfortable and talk about it.
And that you bring up a good point, is that it's how do we, break through the barriers of what stops us from talking about something that is so important in a marriage for the two of us to have each other's back, and I think I'm doing my best to relay a message of hope and understanding. And like you and I are married, like we share so much together that why wouldn't this be something we can share together too?
Right.
But I know it is tough. And I think it's tougher the more years that you're together, the longer you are together. I can see how, just how it's, I'm only more comfortable by the practice of it. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate you. And I don't ever want you to feel forced. However,
we're here live on channel right now talking about. So I understand. But I think it's great that we can walk into this area. I mean, it's like we can walk into it and expose people that, some people will look at our relationship and how perfect it is. And yet we argue about a lot of things, from children and everything else. And even this subject, it's like, as a man, as growing up, I would live this kind of fantasy lifestyle, like reading comic books, watching sci-fi films and stuff. And we always see the part where the guy has the flaming arrow and he shoots it at the pyre of wood with the guy buried on top of it. And we're like, yes, this is what I want. I want to be a Viking or whatever. Like, even in like my favorite movies, like Star Wars, like how Darth Vader was laid to rest on a burning ember fire in the Ewok village. And we see it all the time, and we feel like that's how we're gonna go, and yet we don't plan it, we don't do anything about it, and then after we see it, we don't talk about it. And then personally, just so we have full transparency here, she is planned for her funeral. I am not. I am still on my fence about it. I'm still thinking about all the things, but because of our conversations and because of our arguments, I now start to plan out how it would look, or what I would like, and where I want to explore it. And God bless you for saying the things that you've said. And so, just for full transparency, my wife's like, well, I'm all planned, so don't you want to be buried next to me? And I'm like, oh. I'm like, let me grab the knife out of my back. It's like, oh, of course, like as a husband, you're like, yes, I do. But literally my brain was like, I never thought about that. Because most of my life being a single guy, it's like it was very selfish of me not to think, yeah, I want to be married next to you. And the challenge is I would come up with these excuses. And part of my excuses is like, well, I'm an artist. I don't want to be buried like everyone else. I don't want to just be a name on a tombstone and everyone walks by it like I walk by these other people and they won't know what I did or anything about me. And I hate that. And it's like, so to me, I loved these benches that you find in parks with people's names on it. They'll have a story. My parents took us to Laguna Beach a lot, and I love Laguna Beach. And there's this beautiful place called, thank you, Mom and Dad, for that. There's a beautiful place there called Brown Park, and Brown Park is a tiny, narrow path in between a couple buildings with bricks. Sometimes some homeless people stay in that area or not. But what's so beautiful is when you walk through it, it has the most gorgeous view of the ocean, the beach. But at the end of it has a gorgeous poem and a phrase, and it's beautiful. I cannot recite it for the life of me right now, but I'll tell you, to me, I was like, man, I want to be buried. I want to be cremated. I want to be put into a brick, and I want to be plopped right in that little place. That would be so cool because it's just a beautiful place.
There actually is some memorialization in that area because last time we went, I was just kind of checking it out based on you sharing what you shared, that I want to be a part of that. And I was looking at, there are some memorializations that people have.
That's cool.
Are acknowledged for their life well lived. So the biggest question that I've never asked you, but I'm going to ask it here with everybody is when I bring up the conversation,
hold on,
get prepared,
put the hat on,
lock in, because I was thinking about some questions to be able to ask you and ask for other couples out there. When I bring up the conversation of mortality, death, what do you hear as a male? What do you hear?
The very first element is a defensive mode. My shields come up full throttle, and I'm like, have I, in all due respect, is why haven't I planned this out already? That's my job, is to be respectful and have it planned out. And when I don't have it planned out, I find myself putting my shields up and backtracking because I do not have it handled. So I go into a scarcity feel mode, like, oh crap, this is something I forgot to do, or this is something I haven't done, or this is something I've avoided. And so therefore I'll go into complete shutdown and then walk away from it because it's not handled yet. And then I'll what I call the male scheming. I'll scheme it and figure it out and then come back to you when I'm more prepared, rather than just telling you up front and honest, like, let's talk about it, because I'm completely clueless. So that's honestly what does go on in our conversations. I mean, that was the first conversation, like in the first few years. Now we're openly talking about a lot of different elements.
We've come a long way. We're still,
therapy's helping a lot. Yes.
We're still really struggling with getting on the same page as far as, of course I want you planned. I am planned, but that doesn't make it all like it's all great and wonderful. There's still, I think the goal for me is to, like, on an emotional level, that you and I are really comfortable with the encouragement of the conversation, not only for each other, but for our children, for our grandchildren to one day be okay with it.
Right.
And since it is happening 100% of the time, it's like the logic part of it, it's no longer making any sense to keep it silent or the taboo around it and all of that. So I was just wondering, like, because I know your guard goes up every
Yeah.
time I bring it up, and
Yes.
I'm like, maybe I should just ask him, what does he hear when I'm saying this? So
Well, and
I
that-
appreciate that. That
yeah.
helps me to better understand, like just the place that you're coming from versus what I think he should come from.
Well, there's also another approach to it is when we plan like a family vacation or if we plan a family trip and we're going to go somewhere, there's a Boy Scout in me that over prepares. I look at all the different avenues, I look at all the
Yeah.
different roads, I make sure we have all the additional clothes that we do not need and all the different things that we end up probably not using on the trip. And I stress out about it because I want to make sure that everything's covered. And usually on the trip, there's always a few things I forget. There's something that happens and it gets a little frustrating with that. But in all fairness, I'm overthinking. In all fairness, it's over processing what it truly is. So as my creative mind wants to do all these crazy things about how I want to be buried and stuff like that, to be buried next to you in a cemetery and have my everything all taken care of is actually the most simplest thing to do. And it seems right. But there's a need that I have that I need to fulfill before that happens. And the need is that how do I make that really special so that when I'm gone, there's something even more special about it. And so creatively, as I was thinking about all these different elements, is like, like I said, I'm a big fan of science fiction. I'm a big fan of movies and stuff. And I love, like, there's a series of movies called National Treasure. And there's a point where they go from one place to another, finding little clues of a hidden treasure and stuff. And I thought, how could people find out more about me? Like, if my children want to come visit my grave and talk to me, that's great. But how can they find out more about me? And I thought about maybe planning some type of trip where they have to go to certain locations and find certain things. But the end result is visiting my grave at the end. Yeah, the grave is the treasure where it's truly about themselves, that they came from me and now it's up to them to have their story. And to me, that brought more conclusion to it because you don't say this much, but in all fairness and honesty, this is legacy. This is a true legacy, is that we live our lives to the fullest. We do the best that we can, but to plan ahead and to plan the final stages and stuff is the final legacy, knowing that the journey does come to an end. It's going to happen 100% of the time, as you said. I don't like to hear that because I feel like I will be immortal forever, but that's just not possible. Yeah, that's just me dreamscaping there. But the notion of it is that the moment when it's set in stone, when I pay for what the value and everything for what it is to be buried and put what's going to be on my tombstone, and then I'm coming to terms that my legacy is going to end. And part of me is saddened about that. No, I already know it's going to happen, but I just don't want to come to terms with that. I just want to feel that it also reminds me of what I have not done yet. And that as a man, I get frightened about it because it's like, I get into, I'm not good enough. I get into, like, what am I not accomplished yet? What have I not shared yet? All those things come up into the inadequacies of my journey. So part of these conversations that we have allow me to have permission, not at the final stage, but permission to make that journey possible and plausible. And I enjoy that. I like that a lot.
People, it's not uncommon for people to kind of think about this as a final end, right? I mean, and I understand that. I love when you said legacy. This conversation, though, actually can help us live a legacy while we're alive and have a legacy after, meaning we're talking about it today because we're making better decisions, like today. Like, instead of stressing about the money to not go on a trip, we're basically saying, hey, let's go on that trip. Let's just make something happen, because so often people spend their whole entire lifetime just kind of preparing for retirement and preparing to take that trip one day, and may not ever even have the chance to get it. So you see how the legacy part is not only for after us, but ahead of us. And I think it's pretty cool that you're going to make a little
Journey out of
maybe
it.
what do they call that?
A treasure
Scavenger
hunt.
hunt. A
Yep,
scavenger
yep.
hunt.
Right.
The kids
Are you
would
calling
that
them
would
scavengers now?
that would totally be you, Dan. That would
Yeah.
People do go back to resting places when there is a place to go. And how I found out the truth in that was, well, working in cemeteries. We have 5 locations here in Las Vegas. At any given time, I can go there and I can see that families are visiting their loved ones. And then also the fact that, that we never want to assume what the future holds for our kids. We don't know what their situation would be if they needed a moment with us but I was really glad that you had said, well, now I'm thinking about like being next to you.
Right. Well,
at first he was just like, I'm going to be over here and I want
good
over
luck.
here and
You're
I want over
solo.
here. And I go, do you want to be next to me, honey?
Oh, that
And
hurt
he's
my
like,
gut. That's just like, It's interesting that you mentioned this earlier because when you talked about, I want a place to have my children come visit. And to me, I was like, ugh. I was like, I don't want them to come visit my grave and see me. I want them just to live their lives fully and just remember what I've said or told them or shared with them. And it's ironic because I have a grandfather that's buried here in Las Vegas. He has exactly the same name as me, Dan McElhan. And I would go to it to pretend like if this was my grave, almost like that Christmas Carol element, to find out like what do I need to accomplish now before I'm here. And I seldom go visit. I very rarely visit my family at all at their sites. And luckily for me, I do have my parents that are still living, but I have a lot of family members that are passing on, and it's going to happen. But I loved how you shared the other day, because when you think about visiting someone at a cemetery, like you think about bringing flowers, you think about bringing a lawn chair and sitting there and having a conversation. But you were mentioning something about some people will come out and have barbecues and like do a whole. I'm like, what?
First day I showed up on the job, Marty, they had a boom box, they had a little grill, they had lawn chairs, and I'm just going, this is where I'm going to work. This is exciting,
right?
Like in a cemetery of all places.
Like I would not think bring out a boom box and like playing hip hop or something like that right around the graves. That's like crazy. That's awesome. Or any type of music. So but I like that people celebrate it in different ways because I think that opens up a conversation too. It's like the expectations of how people can celebrate someone who's passed on or how they get together. Because sometimes that's even for the family. It's almost like the gravesite's not really for the person who's passed on. It's for the people that are still living. It's an opportunity for them to gather and just be a family again. As we're arguing all the time and going through our riff-raff and stuff like that, which is good. It's like, I always tell her, like,
it's healthy.
It's healthy. I always say we're kind of like a restaurant. You're like, I'm the oil, you're the vinegar, and we don't get along. We just are separated, but it takes bread to put us together.
Oh, there you go. That's totally us.
That's totally us, and it's so true. And but the one thing about it is that it's okay that we have our individual thoughts, and I love that you respect that. I'm very opinionated. I'm very stern in a lot of things, but also you give me time to grow into this because it's not an easy subject for most people to talk about. It's not an easy subject. Hey, are you pre-planned? No, what? Have you thought about your last day? Not really. I'm planning my next day. Tomorrow.
Yeah.
So
I'm living.
Yeah, I'm living now.
I'm living forever.
And they're like, yeah, but you never know if you're going to die in that moment too. So. Luckily I see friends that travel a lot, and like I've learned from a past client, God rest his soul, Les, from Live on Labs. He shared me this cool card, and I'm like, what is this? He called it the Neptune Society, and he was like, Dan, whenever you travel the world, you need to do this and this because if you die somewhere else, they'll fly you back. And they'll take care of it. I'm like, and he had that all taken care of. I was like, I never even knew about this stuff. Yeah. I wasn't even thinking about like what would happen if we were on the Swiss Alps and I decided to yodel too loud and the snow came over me and we're done. I'm like, wow, but I didn't know that there's a thing that will take your body and bring you back and then do the proper thing. I just had no concept. I was naive to it and clueless. And then to me as a man, it's like how irresponsible I am not to have that ready. And I struggle with it too because I'm a hypocrite right now. I'm saying this, but I still have yet to do it, and that's because I'm still struggling with that.
Well, you'll never get me to push you to do this because it's very personal and very private in the sense of, it's his body, it's his life, it's him, but yet he does have us who care about you a lot, and obviously would be very saddened by that day. But our goal is just to carry out what wishes you want, so that we're not guessing and we're not feeling that we did something wrong, because that's sometimes what happens is, when people have to plan on somebody else's behalf, they're worried that, well, did I honor them the best way? Did I honor, or they go way out, you might get into the, I love you so much, Dan, you might be, you want these certain things, but I'm going to go, hey, that casket there, or that urn, is that the most expensive one? Because, right, because we just adore you. You've
Yeah, I want
got
that hot air balloon, shit, that fire arrow,
the really
have an
big,
explosion.
10,000, or
Yeah.
go to
Sprinkle me
space
over the
or
ocean.
whatever. Travel, yes, very important. I've shared that on the prior shows, is the away from home travel protection to keep us all safe. When you are traveling, it's very expensive if a person passes away from their home. We have those in our pre-arrangement plans. And honestly, I wouldn't travel without it, because it is very difficult for a family to navigate how to get your body back if they have no understanding of even the conversation, right? And that's the educational part of us talking openly and boldly and proudly, is to get this educational piece out from the funeral homes and the cemeteries to the world, so that and into our homes. I love the fact that this conversation brings people back to the dinner table. I've seen
those dinners are really tough. It makes dessert so weird. It's like, oh yeah, I'm done. Thanks. I lost my appetite now. Oh. Let's more
he
candid,
makes me laugh. That's why I married him.
In a different avenue to talk about this, just being openly, is if I was to push myself in a successful way, in a legacy way, as a business owner or as a professor, as a teacher, we always look at our plan of attack. We always look at the outcomes. In teaching, we talk about assessments in our curriculum, and there's these things called rubrics. And like, again, when I was a teacher, they told me about this rubrics, and like the cube with the colors, and they're like, no. Rubrics is like what you say is what you do, and there's a follow up of the lesson that you've taught. What's the outcome? What's the SEL, student learn outcome? It got very analytical on me. My creative mind's like, okay, this is way over my paycheck, and I don't understand this. But as we're talking openly about this, as a successful person of a business, we have to think about what happens if we have to downsize, what happens if we have to scale upwards, what happens if the company gets purchased by another company. All these different factors come into play. And then as a private person, we think about our living wills and our trust funds and all these things for families, because most people don't even dive into those things. So the planning aesthetic is still kind of pushed to the side, because all these other things are in the now and important because of the time, because our wheels are spinning. But yet how important it is, like if we look at business owners or people who are responsible for their business, why aren't they responsible for this? So as a guilt complex, I fight you over this, because I do not have it done. And I'm like, oh, but it's one of those nuggets. It's like having insurance. You got to have insurance. Well, why do I have insurance? It's so expensive anyways. We always fight over that. But again, it's because it's the responsible thing to do. This is a responsibility, because if I don't do it, then it's up to the city or it's up to you. And then you're going to, this is your industry, but if you weren't in this industry, you see the damage it has. I've heard, we've talked about the damage it can have on families when someone passed away and it's not planned out, and the decisions that they have to make. And sometimes it's a wreck. And as a responsible individual, I feel the guilt of that, and I get mad at you at that, because I don't have it I'm not responsible about right now.
Are you not responsible?
Not right now, no. So I'm one of you. I'm sorry, people. I'm the one that I'm still processing rather than taking action. And it's so funny, because I know that sometimes when we are too analytical, paralysis by analysis, I'm thinking about too much, is the only solution is to take action. The only solution is to take action. So the steps that I've taken mentally is I've got all these ideas down to a few. And now I have to pull the trigger. Now I have to sign a contract. Now I have to do this and just pull the trigger. But those conversations would not have happened if we didn't argue about it. That's the argument became the resistance. It's like, okay, how do you wonder why are we bringing that up now? come on, we got to deal with our kids, our home, and their college funds and all this other stuff. And now you want to bring about how I'm going to be buried. I'm like, ugh. It's like, I don't want to talk about that right now. You know, it's a tough subject.
Yeah, it is. And we're doing it. Currently, right now, we are practicing the conversation and normalizing the mortality conversation together. So we're going to take a quick break, going to a commercial. We'll be right back. So stay tuned here at the WWDBTV, broadcasted live every Friday here in Las Vegas. We'll be right back.
Hi everybody, Aaron Phillips here, inviting you to join me every Saturday from 12 to 1 p.m. right here on Worldwide Digital Broadcasting TV on my show, Aaron's Hour with Aaron Phillips. I bring to you the movers and shakers of Las Vegas and really all around the world. It's also fun, entertaining, silly, goofy, informative, everything you'd want to be entertained by on a Saturday, except no politics, no religion. As I said, it's designed to be a fun show. Remember, that's every Saturday from 12 to 1 p.m. Pacific, right here, Aaron's Hour, Worldwide Digital Broadcasting TV.
Hi, my name is Edgar Alejandro. I'm the co-founder of Rising Again Productions. So we've been here in Vegas producing films for the past couple of years, and we've seen our fair share of studios. We've worked in our fair share of studios, and to be honest, WWDBTV has been our favorite by far. John is so welcoming. The space is wonderful. It's perfect for what we need. We've had rehearsals here. We've had callbacks here. We've had table reads here. So if you're a Vegas creative or really just a creative coming into Vegas, definitely check out this space. Chat with John. I think you'll find that this studio has everything that you'll need as well.
Welcome back to the Permission Mission Show. My name is Mary McElhatton. I am your host today. I am here with my husband, Dan.
Hi, I'm Dan McElhatton. I'm the victim for today.
We are talking about mortality. We're talking about, we've been married for 20 years, and Dan and I both are still not on the same page of it being an important conversation to talk about why we can, why we're together. I think this is a struggle for many couples out there. And, you know, our hopes is that we practice more and more of being open about it, not being afraid of it, and also just giving ourselves permission to, you know, be in our own space about it, but also considering one another. Dan's being brave enough to be on the show today. I am prearranged when it comes to my final arrangements, and Dan is not. And I'm okay with that today, you know, with a sense of I want him to feel comfortable for it to be his decision, not mine, because it's your, you know, it's your life. It's something that is important. You were talking earlier on the show about responsibility. So tell me a little bit more of how you're feeling from when we were in the car, you know, arguing. We were arguing because it brings up this emotion that I believe is just, we're basically saying and facing a reality that one day we won't be together. That's the hurt part of it. That's what protects us to not go there with this. But, you know, we're practicing. So how do you feel now? I mean, just by being here for a few, you know, 30 minutes on the show, and you know, the show is about mortality and normalizing the conversation. So how you doing, Dan?
Yeah, I'm nervous. I'm scared. You know what, the other parts of it is I'm glad we're having the conversation. And so, and just to share openly with people, it's like, yeah, we do have a lot of arguments that we talk about, because I sometimes the arguments help me define the logic and what I'm thinking, but also in the logic what you're thinking. So for instance, the machine that you are part of, I'm going to call it a machine, but let's say the element that you're into is you're surrounded by people all the time that are pre-planning and plotting and doing the stuff they need to do for their family members. And that is, and so you've come accustomed to seeing so many different angles, where I come from and the position I have and the element is, as the artist in me, is I have to go through a process of like, okay, I have to show that I'm mortal. I have to come to terms with this. And now that I have to come to terms with it, what am I going to do? And most of the times I'm just not prepared to go into that area because I'm so clueless about it. Now that I have a lot of knowledge from you about all the different avenues and different things, it really got my creative mind thinking. As an artist, I'm thinking, oh, I can be cremated, I can be poured into a sculpture, and I can be put into some city place and stuff. And you're like, no, Dan, you can't do that. It's not legal. I'm like, why not? It's like, well, then if I own my own property, why can't I be buried in my own land or whatever and put my own stuff? No, you cannot do that. And I'm like, well, wait a minute. If we can be cremated and put into jewelry and people can walk around with dead people all the time, then why can't we do something like that? So it allows me to really have very difficult conversations with you, which will open up stuff. And again, the main element that I argue a lot is that it helps me define, okay, my years are up. I have to look at what is the legacy, what's the story I need to say, what's my carpe diem, what's my little phrase I'm going to share with everyone, the carpe diem, like the Robin Williams Dead Poet Society. What's that little phrase I'm going to leave behind? And how can I make it significance even with my death? And what am I going to do? So I get nervous because I'm arguing with you because I'm still trying to figure out what that is. And at the same time, I feel the guilt of, why don't you want to be buried next to me? Like, I do want to be buried next to you. I just hate the whole notion of that we all have to be at one cemetery rather than a location or a place. Like say like on top of Mount Charleston and on a hiking path or something really cool. So I'm not afraid of dying and being buried and having a marker. I'm more figuring out I don't like the system of a cemetery that has all these other people that we don't know about, and I'm just gonna be another name somewhere. And I don't like that. So to me, it's not poignant. But the argument that you fight back to me, you go, well, don't you want a place for your kids to come visit you? I'm like, I don't. I want them to live. I want them to just remember me and live their lives and do things that I shared with them, or just maybe have a celebration. Like that's another thing that pisses me off. People sometimes celebrate their death
Can
days.
we cuss here?
Can we cuss?
We're not regulated by the FCC.
Beep. So the son of a beep, whatever. No, I would just say I get very upset at people who celebrate death days, the days that they die, because to me, I feel the more important day is the day that they lived, is the birthday, the day they came into this world, and stuff. And so, like, even when you let's talk about an argument right now. When we're driving around Las Vegas or any town, you see these markers where the person died.
Yeah.
And they have this huge memorial up with all the flowers and stuff. And I'm so grateful that they're celebrating that person's death. But are they truly celebrating that person's life? Like, what could they do differently where there's a celebration of the life? Not the place where they died, but the place where they impacted someone's life or did something powerful. That's why I have issues when I see all these crosses all over the place. Because to me, that's a marker of where they passed on rather than where they contributed to society. And that's a hard thing. I know they were wanting to have a crosswalk there or a light there, and it's being honored, that thing. But to me, that's a little awkward.
This is a good place to start because, again, it's perspective. We don't know what that means for somebody else. And this is the good part about openly talking about this discussion, is because, you have that feeling, which brings kind of that point to you that, you don't want people celebrating your death day versus somebody else who lost somebody. I mean, on the way here, we went past a beautiful memorial and I, I'm always curious, like, who was that person? What happened? They must have had a car accident. And to the family, it's kind of like a way, I think, of keeping them still alive.
Yeah.
So see, it's the conversation where different perspectives, not a right or a wrong. You can't do this wrong when you're talking about a subject that's 100% proof, and us learning and educating one another on both sides, people who have passed to people who are going to who are going to pre-pass. But John, did you have a question?
Yeah,
or is there a question in the chat?
I had no, this is mine.
Awesome.
And this is for Dan.
Sure.
So if you've ever seen a great movie or read a really good book and you read the last sentence and you close the book and you just go, wow. And that's kind of how I think people are trying to celebrate their loved ones' lives by celebrating their death day. Mm-hmm. It's like, this is the culmination of everything that person has done in their life. And, it's just like the ta-da, So anyway, that's just my personal opinion.
Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
and I don't want to distraught anyone that puts all the time and effort into these spots or these areas that have the memorial. I just find it interesting because for me, instead of that, it'd be interesting. Like, let's say they love the park, or let's say they love the spot. It'd be, why not have a not a memorial, but a celebration of something there that people can learn about their lives or their livelihood, or what they did for fun, to entice other people to do the same, to enjoy that moment. And so to me, the dread of looking at a spot where they passed on is just a little weird, because it is a way for them to mourn. It is a way for them to celebrate that life. It is, as John would say, that last book in the line in the book. But for also, it's like within that book, there's also these nuggets that we learn about life. And some of those we actually will apply. We'll recite them to friends or quotes like that. And that helps us that's more fertilizer for our gardens to grow. And then I would love to see where the other areas could be where these people actually impacted lives, or they made things better or different, and celebrate more of that than what I see with these huge memorials of the death spot, if you will. I call them death spots. So, I mean, I'm evil like that, but it's just something it's challenging for me.
You're not evil. And yes, you got a question?
Yes, I do. Dan, this is for you.
Yeah.
You're talking about legacy and how people will remember you. I want you to find a poem called The Dash.
Yeah.
And it was written, are you familiar with it?
I'm very familiar with that one. Yep.
I was introduced to it years ago as a Kiwanian. I love that poem, especially the last paragraph. And I think it fits exactly where your line is. I want to be remembered. I want to leave a legacy and all that. That last, I pulled it up on my phone to reference.
Oh, perfect.
That last paragraph is something you might want to revisit.
Yeah, that's an incredible poem. My other favorite is Richard Kipling's If.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing poem. If the world can be yours, my son. It's a father giving his son some advice, and it's a powerful poem. And like I said, I'm a nerd and stuff like that. So I actually have, God rest his soul, Kevin Conroy, who's the voice of Batman from the Batman anime series. I got him to do the If poem on my phone, so every time I'm down or whatever, I listen to it. Yeah. But see, those are those wonderful things that we can, as even when someone's gone, they can still resonate with us and bring us some joy in this moment now that's present. And that's what I would love to see more of, is where we can have these celebratory elements, so people are learning about other people's lives, but in enhancing their lives further too. However that could be. Like, we see some of these in some great memorials or parks or whatever, some thoughts where people will have poetry or recite something or a statement, or we'll read it in a book when someone who's long gone from now, or in a movie and art. And that's the one thing I love about art. Art and design has a way of giving these visual references to something that will go way beyond our years and pass on. And I think that's what you're talking about, is that even when you assign yourself to this restitution or resolution of the final day, in the final resting place, at least it's handled so that however you're going to treat that moment can then be established. And so I'm doing it backwards. I'm trying to establish it here and then do that without doing this, so I can avoid that at all costs. I mean, that's my delay. Okay. I'm like that professional procrastinator.
There's, again, no wrong way, Dan. No wrong way.
See how
I love his
that?
curiosity.
That's Jedi. That's so Jedi.
His curiosity
so
has got him.
God
him going. The creativity is going off in his mind, and you are the most responsible man I've ever known. And so, it's not. I take that to heart, knowing that, and yes, if I can bump you to take the ultimate responsibility for your life well lived, and allow us to celebrate and and I call it proper grieving, because I've truly seen when my dad when he planned everything out, it was almost as if he gave all of us permission for him to go. Yeah. And so, and that feels different to one who doesn't have who's never had a conversation, or who hasn't had any type of preparing it. It's as if, and I think as parents, I have a question here, what do you think that this can do for our children and grandchildren by having this open discussion?
Oh, it shows them that we can argue and make up.
Yeah.
And I especially enjoy the makeup process. I recommend that for a lot of people. In all fairness too, it shows them that we are willing to make even hard decisions that no one wants to make. And it shows that we're doing something, so we're not putting off onto them a chore or a task that they don't need to have happen because we can take care of it responsibly. So for instance, like, you mentioned this a lot, and we were talking about all the things that we even have in our home, and I have a comic book collection, I have a t-shirt collection.
He's got a few collections.
Yeah, I have
He's
a few
designer.
collections. I'm a designer, so I like
He's
to be
an
inspired by a lot of
artist.
things. And you're like, what am I going to do with all this crap when you're gone? And I'm like, have fun with it, but that is so true. What's happening right now is these torches, these responsibilities are being handed off to family members that have no idea what to do with these things. And the value treasure, like I'll value a photograph, right? And there's a photograph that has a lot of meaning and stuff to it. When I die, no one knows the whole story behind that photograph at all, unless it's written on the back of it or whatever, or digitally put somewhere. No one's going to understand the story behind it. So therefore, it's only valuable to me right now as I live.
Yeah.
And so the question is that as I get older, I start working on more minimalizing my stuff, my crap, and all the other things, so that everything has its own proper place of where it's going to go and where it needs to be. And I think that's very important for most people, is to plan out, where is this stuff going to go? Is all your clothes going to go to Goodwill? Is all the comic books going to go to a comic book store, to some friends? Or is all my books going to go to a library and stuff? So all these things should be thought through. And then how ironic is that as I plan those things out, it makes me more of a concerned buyer to begin with. Like when I now want to go buy something, I'm like, do I really need it? Is this another thing I got to add to my list? I know she's like, no more t-shirts, Dan, no more t-shirts.
It's working. This guy has way more clothes than I do. He has.
We call that cloth envy.
He's a designer. He's.
I have memories. Each shirt's a memory.
Very artistic, even in his style.
Yep.
And I love that about him. But we have had the hard discussions about
minimalizing.
I can't even say the word.
Minimalizing,
Shrinking,
reducing. Everyone have the source out there.
Eliminating, making things much easier so that it's not all just on a hard day already, and then a hard few weeks, months, years, living differently without a spouse. You've got all that weighing on you as well. That's got to be tough for people. But this is the discussion. This is the part of this discussion that we get to think about.
Yeah.
Like downsizing a little bit, not waiting, not putting off going on vacations, taking the time to say sorry quicker, faster. I'm an honest question for me.
Sure.
I'll ask the question, but you get to give an honest answer.
Oh, lovely.
So since I've been in this industry, in pre-planning and death and burial and all of that, do you see a change in me as for the worse, for the better?
Oh,
I'm giving you a great question to give
sick.
a
She's
bomb
sick
answer.
Now. She's evil now. You're like a Death Eater coming out. No, I'm kidding. Okay. In all honesty, you share these beautiful stories about some people that some are incredibly rude and are just like me, where they're resistance to planning or anything to do with it. And some that are just so embracing having it happen, and watching you cry and watching you share these stories really gives me a wonderful knowledge of how beautiful some people are in this world. And I love that. Like where a husband and wife will take care of not only a plot for themselves, but for their whole family, and they're planning it all out for them to have a decision, so their children don't have to worry about anything. And when I hear about some of these stories and stuff, some people we've even become friends with, Todd and Chen, if you're out there, great people, just amazing, heartfelt people that are just so loving. It just shows me how beautiful life is even further by talking about it. It makes the hard conversation not hard anymore. It just shows the beauty in society that allows it to grow. So as I see this coming from you, I see you maturing more and more. You're taking more risks. You're taking more things. You wanted this show. You're doing it. You're no longer saying it. You're doing it. So the procrastinations become action, and I adore you for that. I've watched you mature and grow, because this is truly your dream. You want to see yourself with a huge audience. You want to see yourself, like you were talking about, like you want to be, at one time, you just want to be a very well-known speaker in front of a huge stage with a huge audience, to allow people to have that permission to talk about it. And I think that's necessary too. And for me, it allows me to be a better man. It allows me to be a better human, not only for me in what I do in my vocation, but also with my family and my children and with you, because then it helps me mature more, helps me grow more, helps me not be so stubborn. And you have to realize sometimes
I'm stubborn too.
yeah, we're like oil and vinegar. I mean, it's like it gets ugly. And my wife has this wonderful thing. I'm going to put you on the spot again. We always have these arguments and in our car. And one time we were just arguing all the way to a trip from Vegas to LA to San Diego for a wedding. And we're arguing a whole way. We're almost in San Diego. My wife looks at me bold in the eye and goes, "Are we done now? Are we done?" And literally my first thought in my head is like, oh crap, she's talking about the D word, the divorce. I thought she wanted a divorce. I was like, oh my God. It wasn't that. She was thinking, are we done arguing?
Are we done?
And I'm like going, and I like I felt my whole head flushing out, the blood's leaving. I'm like, no, I don't want to die. I want us to work through it. And she goes, no, are we done? And I look at her, I just stare at her, and she goes, are we done arguing? I'm like, oh. And that relief for me. Now the irony is, as we show up to this wedding of our friends getting married, they had to sit in the front row. It was a huge wedding. And before they start, they go, we have to do this. Dan and Mary, would you please stand up? And we're like, and we're standing up in front of this wedding, and they go, if it weren't for these two people, we wouldn't be being married today. And I'm like, oh, we are the last two people you want to represent you right now. You've just seen us arguing the whole way here.
The whole way.
And no, literally, we did. We argued right before day. We were talking about family. We were talking about a lot of different things. We're talking about responsibilities of husbands or wives, and sometimes in our marriage, finance is a big argument. Death is a big argument. Life is a big argument. There's a lot of things. We don't argue about religion, thank God. That's awesome, and we have a great foundation there. But there's a belief system, no matter what it is, that you have to realize, whatever your belief system is, that no matter what, you're going to die anyways.
Yeah.
And what's going to happen after your death, that will be based on your belief system. But the other thing is that you have to tend to how you're going to be taken care of when that happens. And some people don't like to take care of that. And for me, I am avoiding it because I'm trying to plan it. And the funny thing is, I'm still avoiding the try. I'm avoiding that all. So so our conversations in all fullness and honesty about you, the stories you share give me permission to take more steps of applying what I want to do and how I'm going to slow. So it helps me define it better.
Okay, you guys heard it on TV. He's going to take some steps. That's true. I really appreciate that, because I don't want that day to happen. And then us, at least like today, we had the conversation with everybody, and that's a huge first start. And then taking some action is the next step. I want to just acknowledge the next show. It is going to be a tough show because we're going to wrap up today's show. I have special guests coming on, and I always said that we would talk about really difficult things, right? Okay, so this one's going to be a difficult one. It's about suicide, and it is about someone who had really struggled with it and was not wanting to be alive on this planet. And by a miracle, she's going to be here, and she's going to share her story with her daughter and how that affected their family. And I think that us openly discussing death does help a person possibly think a little bit differently about suicide. But we're gonna practice with this. We're gonna be back here next week. I'm gonna have them on the show. They'll tell you their story. And I don't know if you've had thoughts about suicide, or if you have had somebody in your family or a friend who's committed suicide. But we are gonna honor them on that show next week. So please join us next Friday. It will be we'll be here live broadcasting at the WWDBTV. Also, you can always share these videos if they are not able to watch. If someone's not able to watch the show, or somebody watched the show and they want to share it, go to the Facebook Permission Mission. Go to the Facebook Mary McElhatton, also the WWDBTV. We are going to say goodbye. Dan, thank you again for being here today. I hope that you heard something in this show today that would allow you to be creative about your legacy.
And for all the men out there, just realize you can't argue with your wives. as long as you make up afterwards. Okay. I want to give you permission out there, and
He's
it's okay.
taking me to lunch.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah.
Good deal.
Hey,
No, thanks for the opportunity.
arguments, I think are valuable.
Yeah.
I think that working through them is even more valuable. So thank you for working through the valuable things. I've got one little slide I wanted to show you here. A lot of you will recognize this clipping from a wonderful show. This is kind of special for Dan. When I watch the movie Up, I do think about us. I do, because I think it just kind of looks like you, Dan.
See how
you
wonderful
know?
she is, that Jedi move. She's now calling me a blockhead. I love this. That's so, she's so subtle.
If
I
you've
love
never
it.
watched the cartoon show or the movie Up, it is so sweet, and it is definitely it correlates with what we're talking here today about. But Dan, will you do me the honors of reading what it says?
Absolutely. It says, one day you are going to hug your last hug, kiss your last kiss, and hear someone's voice for the last time. But you'll never know when the last time will be. So live life every day as if it were the last time you'll be with the person you love. Aw. Yay.
I'll leave you all with
Aw,
that
you're
this
so
week.
sweet.
We can kiss. We can kiss.
Hey!
I'll see you all next week. Thank you.
This will be a long lunch.